Hey everybody, welcome to Predict 2023. My name is Sharon Florentine. I am the managing editor here at TechStrong Group. It is awesome to be here with you today and with my excellent panel. We are going to kick things off and talk about, the topic is long live DevOps. And I know we've seen a lot of predictions over the last couple years about the fact that DevOps is either dying or already dead. We obviously strongly disagree with that. And we think that there is a bright future for DevOps. So we're going to dig into a little bit about that today, where we think DevOps is going, a little bit about where it's been, whether or not it's been able to fulfill the promises that it has made and that people have made about it. That's just a little teaser. But before we really get into it, I just want to say thank you to my awesome panel for being here today. I think I've got the best panel of the day, but that's just me. With me today are Chris McHale, who's the co-founder and CEO of SPK and Associates, John McKenney, SVP and GM of Intelligent Z Optimization and Transformation at BMC, and Jeff Keyes, Director of Product Marketing at Atlassian. Welcome, folks. If you want to take a minute or so and introduce yourselves, and then we will kick things off. Chris, you want to go first?
Sure, yes. As Sharon mentioned, I'm co-founder and CEO of SPK and Associates. We're located in the San Jose area, Silicon Valley area, and we have been really all about automation and IT or technology really to support product development, specifically these days software. And so we're evangelists for DevOps.
Awesome.
Love it.
John, want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
And as you said, I am the general manager for BMC Software's Intelligent Z Optimization and Transformation business units, also known as our mainframe business. And what I thought was funny, Sharon, you said, is DevOps dead? I've been in the mainframe business for a few years, and I've heard, is the mainframe dead? Look, the mainframe's not dead, DevOps isn't dead, and it's not going to be dead in the next 20 to 30 years. So looking forward to the conversation here today.
Awesome. All right, Jeff, you're up.
Awesome. So I'm the product marketing director for our enterprise agility solutions at Atlassian. But what you really don't know is that I started off as a developer, lived the life of making all the mistakes, feel like I got kicked out of that, was an architect, product manager. It's funny as I've seen, and been faced with the problems of how do you deliver value faster, look at my own mistakes in the journey. The fundamental tenets of DevOps and, integrated product teams at the ultimate end of it are still there. No one's ever said, gosh, we need to deliver value slower and less reliably and with less trust to our customers ever. It's not, no one's ever said that. And that is the fundamental tenet of where DevOps comes in.
Awesome. All right. So one of the big promises that DevOps made, or that DevOps was supposed to deliver on, is that it was going to break down those silos between dev and ops, right? DevOps. Do you think that it has made good on those promises? I mean, are the silos gone now? Why or why not? You're grinning, Jeff, so I'm going to go right back to you.
Well, so, we deal with a lot of folks at the enterprise level. Many of those folks are in highly regulated environments. And so, the cab comes in to say, thou shalt, and you've got to have X, Y, Z in place, and still requiring a fair number of things that have to come, to be validated. Because if you don't get it right in a regulated environment, like, it's not just you get fines and so forth, like, people go to jail. And ultimately, you have to look at, being trustworthy to our customer base. Trustworthy computing is the initiative. How do you make that and deliver value as fast as possible? DevOps is not dead. It's going to help us forward. It's making progress, but running into some of the cultural and logistical aspects. Some organizations I've talked to still compensate ops on how much uptime do you have, and that's your value that you provide. Well, if that's my value, I'm going to push back on anything that disrupts that, like development, shipping code into production. And then development is maybe they're compensated for how much stuff they're pushing to production. Oh my gosh. If we don't address the culture and the organizational problem and get people aligned that, look, delivering value reliably to our customer base, that's the point. And have everybody on the same page with that joint goal, we're not going to get there. Okay.
So John, let me ask you how you think this applies, in your space, in the mainframe space. I mean, what are you seeing on this front?
Yeah, I think you were asking about the silos and the promise of DevOps, and what we're seeing is that DevOps is now extending into core platforms. So for many organizations, the mainframe is absolutely one of their core platforms, but it's maybe been a little bit slow to the party, if you will, in terms of really embracing DevOps and automated pipelines and workflows. So we absolutely see that. And as Jeff was saying, customers are really focused on what is the business journey they're trying to deliver. And most applications today are a hybrid application, right? It may start on an edge device or a mobile device and may interact with a number of cloud and core systems. And they really recognize it's really important that they have more automation and connections between those systems so that they can have a fully automated and audited and process-driven process, so that, just as Jeff was saying, right, everyone wants to develop and deliver capabilities to their clients faster, but they want to do it with higher quality code, with less business disruption. And the promise of DevOps and automating those flows is absolutely a key to making progress in that journey.
So that's a great segue, because my next question deals with automation. And Chris, has the automation promise really been fulfilled for DevOps? I mean, how's that been working out? And is it, is it doing what it needs to do to increase developer productivity and velocity and delivery speed?
I think it has, but I think it's a little bit of a spectrum, right? So this isn't a black and white yes or no answer at all.
Right.
In our business, we deal with a lot of, we're a services or a consulting company, so we deal with a lot of different clients of different sizes, and we also have quite a number that are in medical device, so they're highly regulated. And it really comes down to, I mean, to answer your question, I would say yes, absolutely, automation has happened. It's happened a ton. I mean, we're seeing more and more of it. We try to advocate more and more of it, and we implement quite a lot of it at our clients. But it's a little bit like the fellow who wants to lose 100 pounds and says, well, I've lost 60, so you get another 40 to go. I think that's the thing with automation. And it also depends on, I would say, a little bit of the size, but I'm going to talk about the regulated environment for just a second. Automation in a regulated, like a medical device environment, is definitely their friend. The more you can automate something, the more ensured you are about the quality, which is, of course, the goal of anything in regulation in medical device. So that's something that we really try to promote and push. But it does have its limits too, in terms of what can be done.
Yeah, understood. And I guess it seems like depending on the size, automation can look different.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think the smaller and the software companies, the exclusively software, are much more able to do that. But the mechatronic companies, like a medical device, there's definitely some limits as to what can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, valuable too. I know one of the favorite books I ever read on DevOps was about really applying DevOps principles to firmware at HP with their LaserJet line. And the model of, look, in order to get the automation, you've got to decompose your application, you got to build in gating, you've got to up your testing, and there's just a whole journey that's valuable. And deciding, which areas do you make that investment into, which product lines, which ones are going through change. A lot of value in that journey.
Yeah. It's back to, with automation, there are certain things you just don't want to automate because it's not worth it.
Correct.
Especially if you've got a guy that's got to push a button, you've got a device, like you're talking about the printers. I'm thinking about the devices. There's a certain, you could, infrastructure as code a lot of that stuff, but it's just not worth it at a certain point. So there is a limit.
Completely.
Yeah, I would add that I think, we believe there's going to be a bit more of an emergence of what maybe I'll describe as a cross-functional pipeline. So, as we were talking about before, right, you've got these complicated business services, and there's a lot of automation and has been in the different silos, but they've not been really connected very well. And so we're starting to see, organizations really look at more of a cross-functional, you might call it a single, but it's really more about an integrated, connected pipeline across these different elements that helps drive a greater sense of quality as well as improve the speed, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're going to continue to see developing. And that's why I think it's so important that every vendor, so like Jeff and myself representing and Chris from a consultant, right, that you're really focused on integrating, right? Being able to enable clients to integrate the automation that they're building and delivering, because there's any number of elements and almost every business service is going to have different components. So you want to standardize, and to be able to standardize, you need to be able to integrate those different elements of your pipeline automation and testing.
Yep. It's a good point. What a great way to think about this is like, it's easy for someone in a, way off place to think, oh, just automate the whole thing, just decompose everything down to, infrastructure as code, just automate your data and get that tilted up, just automate all your, that's an investment. When I think about the journey of DevOps and automation, really have to look at not just the DevOps journey, but the Agile journey. Have to look at the architecture. One of the things we've been talking a lot about inside of Atlassian is, if you're on this journey as a product person, you ought to start looking and making that work visible. And so we start talking about this value stream approach. Well, wait a minute. If we're going to look at the work of automation, at risk reduction, and at debt and refactoring code, why don't we put all that in from our Agile journey into part of the types of work that we look at instead of just, feature defect? And so we're starting to look at these things as saying, well, there's features, there's defects, well, there's risk. How do we automate the pipeline itself? How do we introduce security testing, white code, all the various checks, library validation to, licensing even, and get that up into the pipeline, or even further left, if you got to do a threat model, get that into part of the tasks that the developers do before they start coding, instead of waiting for the very end. Like in a regulatory environment, you go in front of CAB, did you do a threat model? No. What if something really bad is there? You're not shipping, so feature, defect, risk. And the last one is technical debt, because, in the journey, probably you're going to have to decompose your application. You're probably going to have to break it apart. All of that is part of the investment, and better include it as you look at how you're approaching your DevOps journey.
Yeah, I think, and we definitely see some of that, Jeff, when we talk about core systems, right? So,
yep.
A variety of core systems will have, components of the application or business process that might be, fairly large, right? So when you have something that might be tens of thousands of lines of code, it's hard to build, a really finite testing around that, right? Where do you start, to Jeff's point earlier? So that's where we see, clients looking at how they address some of this technical debt, how they break down some of that code into smaller components, which enables them to do better testing, right? So now I can really isolate and test the thing that's changed, where when you're looking at, this 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 line of code, it's kind of hard to do that because there's so many different processes that are handled within that one component.
Totally.
So I'm going to go back a little bit because we were talking about measurement and how we determine when something is valuable. So that brings me to, of course, the metrics discussion. How do we measure whether or not these things are working? How do we know that we're delivering value or that something is sufficiently fast enough or quality enough? And, what do you do if it's not?
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say I think we would all agree, right, that as the old adage, right, you can't improve what you're not measuring, right? So measurements are absolutely critical, and we definitely see more and more clients really getting in and wanting to understand the metrics. And there's a variety of metrics, best practices around the door metrics, et cetera. So it's really about having the metrics to understand what is your development flow and velocity, what's your error escape rate, what's your mean time to resolution. And we see more organizations really looking at that as part of that DevOps process, as part of that continuous improvement process. So where was I spending my time on this most recent sprint, right? How and where can I automate some actions to improve and get better in the next sprint, right? So that's part of the continuous improvement process. And the only way you can really do that effectively is you need the measurements and metrics to be able to do that. And that's something that we see more and more adoption in the coming year. And that's a capability that is extended and is available to core systems now, which again, you look back a few years ago, it wasn't, and now it is.
We're seeing a lot of investment in this area, which I think is absolutely critical and necessary. I would say, for me personally speaking, the ability to have dashboards, to use that term, so basically, whether it's single pane or multiple, but this is, I think, true for anybody in any kind of leadership or product management position. You have to be able to see it immediately. I think if you have to wait, there's some psychological problem with that you, even if you get the report later, there's a disconnect, between what has happened. So having those real-time dashboards, and of course, a lot of the tools, we work a lot with Cloud Bees. They've got some fantastic tools that do feed into dashboards, but there's usually work, sometimes a lot of work that needs to be done to integrate a lot of the reporting and the metrics from the different tools so that you have something that pulls it all together in a picture and you can make decisions and understand where your problem points are. So I think that whole concept's really important. The metrics are absolutely critical. I mean, you can't improve anything until you measure what's going on.
Boy, these are love this topic. So I'm help start the Value Stream Management Consortium, which is about, hey, provide metrics on your pipeline and not just your pipeline from idea to delivery and show value through. And so the fundamentals of it is why don't we ask questions like, how long does it really take from the time we think of something to get it to the customer? So often from a DevOps perspective, it's just about how long does it take, from check-in to get it to production and what was my failure rate. I think probably the biggest thing that I heard, well, I'll tell a quick story. I had a customer call and somebody said basically that they were going to get, MBO'd on, their deployment frequency. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, that is the wrong answer. What an easy thing to make a whole bunch of money on, because if I want to increase my deployment frequency, I can do that. That's no problem. I can start checking in comments every single day, and why don't we measure keystrokes and figure out where we're going? The biggest piece of advice that I've ever gotten and given on that is start with where you're going. What is it you're really trying to accomplish, and then use metrics to manage your journey, if you will. Remembering that our goal isn't just getting, stuff through from check-in to production, but it's the entire pipeline. Sometimes it may be best to look at stuff that's before you get to the DevOpsy side, the fuzzy front end. And if it takes you 18 months to figure out what features to build and you spec them out, and then finally, by the time it gets to development, now you're, okay, why is it taking so long? Well, there might be a problem in another area that you should focus on. The DevOps side is good though, because if it takes you another 6 months just to release it, well, now you know where that problem's at. Metrics will help guide this journey, but you better do a value stream map from idea to production to know where that is, pull those metrics out, and then figure out which ones will actually help you achieve your goals. Back to the planning side. Please, I hope there's product people listening to this who would normally think, I don't give a crap about DevOps. You do, because it's part of the investment balance that you should be making. What are your metrics for your deployment frequency? How often do you fail? What is the time it takes, and the cost of failure? What does it take for you to recover from that? How long? That's an investment that you ought to be making as a product person, because you can fix that. And it reduces risk, improves, customer trust. And those metrics are central and key to what you should be doing.
Yes, someone in the audience made the comment that there should be effort put to, even go so far as to define unit cost. So like really getting down into, I'm going to extrapolate from that and say really get granular about what you're doing and where you're going.
Yeah.
They'll correct me if I incorrectly made assumptions there.
Well, and if you from an investment point of view, it is interesting, to look at what does it cost us to deliver a feature. Well, it depends. How robust, how trustworthy, how modeled is the pipeline, how reliable. Lot of different aspects, because you can deliver a feature cheap, you can deliver a feature expensive, you can deliver a feature that's more robust for the long term. There's investments. Sometimes it may make sense. Just get this little thing out. Nobody's going to use it. Nobody cares. On the website, if you get it wrong, it's not a big deal to change a couple of words here and there. I'm really going to get shot for that, I'm sure.
I was going to make the comment that it's the fast, good, and cheap. Pick any two.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you want the? Yeah.
I was going to add, Sharon, I think as Jeff was saying, I think we absolutely believe there's a tremendous benefit in doing value stream mapping, right? To really understand the process. And, we have a number of clients have gone through that, and then they're kind of taking some of the next steps, right? So some of the next steps are using metrics to understand how their different development teams are performing, right? So again, it's a little of an apples and oranges because they're having different projects, but you can see where you might have a little bit better flow velocity. You can see where you might have a little bit higher level of quality. So they're digging in to understand with metrics, what's different about these teams. And what they are looking into metrics is defining, what tools might they be using? Are they using something different on this team versus that team? So they're able to ask those next questions and maybe able to provide some additional training or maybe some additional tooling to help, their teams, all are executing more at some of their best teams' level of productivity. So there's a lot that can be done with metrics to help every team improve. And that's why I think we absolutely see more of that being utilized in the coming year.
One thing I would just jump in on, last comment on metrics is that I think it's really important to push all of that down as low as possible.
Yep.
Because you don't want to be providing this information, at a certain level of the hierarchy or whatever you want to call it, and then not down lower. Engineers are all smart, capable people, and the more information they get, but in addition to that, knowing what they're being measured on and what is important, to speak to what Jeff was talking about, spending time really defining what is important to measure here, but then pushing all that down as low as possible so people can look at it themselves and correct themselves and check themselves. That's the most efficient way to do it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, DevOps was born again because ops, you're compensated on making sure nothing goes down. Dev, you're compensated on making sure you can get as much crap across the fence as you can. Go. Think there's a problem? Want to create it again? Hey, Dev, how fast can you deploy code? Let's see what happens. They're good things, but
right.
Don't manage that way.
Well, and what you're really saying there too is that you have to take some of those metrics and spread them out across the dev and the ops, right? So don't just make ops responsible for uptime. Make them also have them look at the speed or velocity of release and et cetera.
Exactly. One of the cultural things I heard, I wish I could articulate the same way I heard it, but it was effectively enable the teams to make improvements themselves and have that be a culture. And if the culture is one of experimentation with cross-functional autonomous teams, and then allow them the space to experiment. Hey, we tried automating this, we tried, refactoring Y, whatever, different kinds of pieces, and see how it improved. In general, they'll do the right thing. Need better? That's where your product team can really help out on the investments of, well, gosh, we're seeing we're delivering too many features on this. We better go make this area more robust, bolster up the pipeline, refactor the technical debt. Maybe we just need to focus on bug fixing. But balancing all that and then using metrics to show how we're doing. And remembering that the metrics aren't just how well do we deploy the code, but at the end of the day, the outcome is, is it getting used? What's our adoption rate? Is some of the pirate metrics that a product leader would think about beyond just, code delivery. Those are important, but they're all in conjunction together to see how we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, these are all good problems for DevOps to have, right? We're not figuring out, can we do this? Can we make it faster? Can we deliver it at higher quality? We've already done that. Now we're refining the things that we've already figured out we can do and do well, or at least that's my opinion. So we've been talking about metrics and uptime and measurement and all that. And, we hear and see a whole lot lately about observability. So obviously observability is kind of putting all of those pieces together, using the metrics, using the feedback, using the pipelines to figure out when something goes wrong, where did it go wrong? How did it go wrong? How can we fix it? How does observability support DevOps mission? And related, but not, exactly, what the heck can we do with all of that data that we're generating to inform observability? And I know that was like 7 questions at a time, so I'm sorry.
I'd jump in. I think, one of the things that we've all seen over the last couple of years is, the tremendous increase in the use of AI ML, right? And observability is probably one of the prime spaces, right? So I think we're going to see more where you think about DevOps, and especially, from an ops team, they might be taking the lead on this from the operational systems, but really leveraging AI ML to do, causal analysis. And we talked earlier about silos. So one of the challenges with these, business processes that are on multiple different architectures is there's a lot of AI ML silos today, right? So you have a little AI ML where I'm doing observability on this component. There's another one that's on this component, another one on this component. I think we're going to see more of a convergence where these different AI ML planes, if you will, are feeding in and integrating so that you can really understand what is the AI ML telling me on these different elements and how do I bridge that across. So coming back to the developer, right? I'm responsible for the business service. It's a complex business service. There's something that's going wrong. Where is the problem in it, right? Because in some of these elements, it might be the developer code. It might be how that code is interacting with a massively shared infrastructure component. So that's where observability can really help teams much more rapidly detect where the issue is so they can more rapidly resolve the problem. So I think we're definitely going to see more AI ML observability across the stack.
I think it comes back a little bit back to the silos, right? So even if you have AI ML, if you have silos of information, you can, if you sit there and stare at it long enough, I mean, you've done this, so you can make the connections, but that it is just a really ineffective way to do it. So you have to find ways to integrate this data, to integrate this information. And the AI ML can help you with that, but understanding what to look at and how to correlate and connect it, and sometimes just getting back to that dashboard again, just getting a picture of the different disparate pieces of information on one visual page allows you to draw and make connections and draw conclusions that you otherwise couldn't have. We do a lot on the ops side of DevOps, and we've seen some real benefits from putting time and effort into pulling all that data together.
Yeah, and boy, couldn't agree with all that more. It's interesting as the journey, we talked about how the journey of DevOps is mixed with metrics, but it's also mixed with this discussion of I have to effectively decompose my monolithic applications into smaller components. Well, the end state of that now produces new problems. Okay, you took your entire monolith and now you've got thousands of microservices with dependencies, and they're all in production. And who knows which one does what? Where's your listing of them? What health? If I have one component that fails 1% of the time, and now I'm increasing its usage, oh my gosh, how do I know that? Where do they, looking at the chain of events, John, you were talking about the AI ML, that's like, that. Of course, you have to kind of know this. Hey, I'm noticing a pattern that when this component here starts to fail, over here, this one's also failing. Good. That's why you have to have this stuff in place as you're in this journey to figure out where do you need to increase your health. What is your DevOps health? It's not just about DORA metrics. It is about your observability of like, how's it working in production so that you can then continually fix it.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got about 15 minutes left here. So I want to ask you each to weigh in on what you think the biggest objectives for DevOps should be going forward in 2023. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll dive in a little bit. Look, wherever you're at, keep investing. If I had to say one thing, it is look to an organization that's a cross-functional product team, meaning you build it, you own it as a team. Now you're all aligned on the same goals. Look at your entire pipeline and look at how you can fix things from idea to production, knowing that from check-in on through and the automation and all that is entirely, important. Make investments of work since, now we're asking developers to do everything. Make it visible. Call the various work types what they are. It's beyond, developers are doing more than just feature defects. Make them visible. Decide as a product team how much investment you should make in each one. Introduce the automation as you go. Make visible how you're doing in a culture where it's about experimentation. I love, Chris, that you talked about, like, we should just be able to get these metrics all the time and make them transparent completely. But they have to be automatic. It can't be somebody, let me go figure out what my deployment frequency is and calculate it, what it was 6 months ago. It doesn't matter what it was 6 months ago, matter what it is today. And put all these pieces together and just decide what your next step in the journey is going to be as you're in this space, and make that be your culture. Whatever you're at and whatever you're doing, if that's your culture, you'll make the right decision on what the right next step is.
That's a great point. It looks a little different for everyone based on where they are. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I would. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would echo a lot of what Jeff says and go a little slightly different direction. First of all, without any doubt, it's a cultural approach, right? DevOps is, and Jeff is absolutely right. Even if you're 20% of the way there, 50% or whatever you view 100% of DevOps in your company would be, just keep working at it. It doesn't stop. It's really a continual improvement, continual quality improvement of what you're doing in terms of your processes and automation and all of that. I would say on the culture side, what we've seen in a lot of our clients is if DevOps and this mindset and philosophy is really embraced at a higher level in the company, at an executive level, it will be and can be successful. And sometimes you have to educate your executives and educate that team a little bit more if they don't live and breathe in this space. From a business perspective, you have to sort of effectively educate them and tell them why this is valuable and why it helps the bottom line, why it helps all of these things, because they have to really embrace this. And the final comment I would make in terms of the culture, in terms of where it's going, there's this interesting thing we've seen because, like I said, we're a little bit more in the ops space. There's a definite different personality type in dev versus ops. It's very different, and you have to work really hard. You can break down all the silos you want. People have to be communicating, and they have to respect each other's point of view because they have very different points of view. Forget about the metrics for a minute. They're just different people. And so really encouraging them to talk to each other, take risks together, and work together, I think is a huge part of this. We haven't really talked about, but we see as being very important.
Yeah. All right, John, you get to wrap up the crystal ball conversation.
Yeah, I would. I just kind of add to what Jeff and Chris were saying. For people that are listening, you're not alone, right? There are more people than ever before that are on this journey, and what's important is to either start the journey, and if you're already on it, I have every confidence that you're continuing on that journey, and it's about continuous improvement, whether you're on the dev side or the ops side. I would say you both are really after the same thing, right? It's just two different elements of it. You're trying to deliver more value for your organization. And the way you both do that is you have to deliver new capabilities, but you got to do it in a way that it performs, it's available, and it's resilient. That's why both teams working together is so important. I think we've shared a lot of different ideas here. If some of the things that we talked about seemed a little bit futuristic, what I would say is I think everything that we talked about you can do today, and you can reach out into the community. You can reach out to any of us on the panel, but you can reach out to peers, and you can find people that are having success, that are on a journey. And I would encourage you to collaborate because this is a tremendous community. Everyone benefits when we're sharing information with each other, when we're sharing best practices and how we can improve. So I would say get started and continue the journey because there's a lot of value you can really bring to your business. And when you have those kind of successes, frankly, it's just fun. It's fun, right? So get after it, have fun, and you're going to have success for your organization.
Perfect.
So true.
Awesome.
I love that. Just to really reiterate that point, there's nothing stopping you from making metrics about your improvements and celebrating your successes, because you can do this at any point in time. You don't have to convince anybody. And the most biggest cultural change you'll ever make in your organization is having a success story where like, hey, our team, we decided to automate blah, blah, blah. And it was cool. Or it was a disaster. And here's what we learned. And what a cool thing to then be able to promote that, because ultimately you're going to have one of those where it rocked. Not only did it rock, but it improved the value delivery. And look what we're doing now. That culture is, it's infectious. Like people want to do, I want to do that. What'd you do? How'd you do it? There's nothing stopping you from doing that, having that story. So just get going.
Hey, this is so, sorry. It's so true. I'm so excited because that's so true. I always tell my son, even when you screw up, even when you fail, it teaches you something. You didn't really fail. You learned more about how you can succeed next time. And, he looks at me and he rolls his eyes. But that's right. That's DevOps. That's what's going to keep this going to the futures. All these people screwing up a little bit, going back, figuring out how to make it better, continuous improvement.
I think also some people, if they're starting this journey, they don't know where to start because it seems absolutely immense and it seems overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, most people start in like the CI/CD space, first and foremost, because it's a category and you can kind of focus in on it. But I would just say, pick the thing that is causing you the biggest problem. What's taking the longest? What is causing your developers and operations guys to fight all the time? Just find the one thing and just take it one bite at a time. Just take that one thing, go ahead and figure out what's going to make it better. Is automation going to solve it? Like what, or is it communication? Sometimes it's not technology. It's just simply talking to each other more on a more frequent basis. I mean, it can be very low tech, but you can just take one bite-sized problem and start there.
Yep. Boy, and remember, when you're on that journey, you're promoting a strategy, and promoting a strategy there's a pattern to it that you have to incorporate. Look for the ideal that you're trying to get to. That's your hypothesis. Look for what the direction is that you're going to have to get done. And then you're going to have to repeat that, that goal, that hypothesis, and looking for the obstacles and what kind of outcomes will you get. And you're going to repeat that over and over again and get feedback on it while you're on this journey. You've got to get people bought in.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Cool. Thank you all so very much for being here with me today. I know it's early for some of you, and I extra appreciate that. I hope that you all out there in the audience are going to stick around because we have a whole day of awesome Predict sessions and keynotes and speakers ahead for you. Thank you all so much for joining us, and hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon.
You bet. It was great to hang out with you all.
Yeah.